You hear the name Elon Musk, and what comes to mind? Real-life Iron Man, the guy who's single-handedly changing the future? Well, lately, things have gotten a little weird, right? Especially with the whole Twitter/X saga. It's got a lot of people looking at this tech icon and asking, what's really going on behind the curtain? In this explainer, we're going to dig into that.
So that's the big question, isn't it? Is he the genius savior, the self-made visionary pushing humanity to the stars? Or is there a much messier and more controversial truth hiding behind that carefully crafted myth? That's the core tension we're going to explore, based on the research and reporting we've gathered. Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to unpack this whole thing piece by piece. First, we'll tackle that self-made story. Then, we'll follow his moves through Silicon Valley. After that, we'll get into the real history of Tesla. We'll also take a hard look at his management style. And finally, the big one, the X factor, the absolutely wild takeover of Twitter.
All right, first up, the self-made myth. You know the story we've all heard, right? The classic rags to riches tale. A guy with nothing but a dream who builds an empire from the ground up. But what if that story isn't the whole story? What if some pretty important details got left on the cutting room floor?
And boom, here it is, side by side, the myth we all know versus, well, a very different reality according to our source. The claim is that he wasn't starting from scratch at all. He was born into a wealthy family in South Africa during apartheid. His dad was an engineer and a property developer. And then there's this wild story about a family-owned emerald mine in Zambia. And look, Musk's own story on that has changed a few times over the years, which is interesting. Okay, so emerald mine or not, the point is the family had money, a lot of it. And that wealth was a golden ticket. It meant he could easily immigrate to Canada. His mom was Canadian, so citizenship was basically a given. We're talking about a kid who had thoroughbred horses and motorcycles when he was just 14. And you have to remember the context here. This was apartheid South Africa. Being part of the white minority gave him an enormous economic leg up from day one. So he makes his way to Silicon Valley, the land of tech dreams. And it's here, with his very first companies, Zip2 and X.com, that our source says we start to see a playbook emerge, a pattern of, let's call it creative storytelling, of rewriting the past, and making sure his own image always came out looking great. Take the story of his first company, Zip2. The myth is he's this tech wizard, a programming genius who built it all himself. But the reality, according to the reporting, well, that initial 28 grand in funding, it came from his dad. There's even a story that he tricked investors by sticking a regular old PC inside a huge empty box to make it look like a powerful supercomputer. And his code, it's been described as amateurish. So much so that when they hired actual programmers, they basically had to scrap it all and start over. Okay, this one is a huge misconception. Did Elon Musk found PayPal? The simple answer is no. His company, X.com, merged with PayPal's parent company. And get this, he was actually kicked out as CEO by the board because they didn't like his decisions. So why do we all call him a PayPal founder? Because his separation agreement legally required everyone to call him a founder. It was literally a line item in a contract. And you're starting to see that pattern we talked about, right? Well, claiming founder status didn't stop with PayPal. Next up, we're talking about the company that made him a global icon, Tesla. But again, the question is, did he actually start it? Let's just look at the timeline. It makes it super clear. 2003, two guys named Martin Eberhard and Mark Tarpenning incorporate Tesla Motors. A year later, in 2004, Elon Musk comes in with a big investment and becomes chairman. Fast forward to 2007, and he's managed to push Eberhard, the actual original founder, out of the company. And, sound familiar? After a lawsuit, a legal settlement was reached that allowed Musk to officially call himself a founder of Tesla, too. Okay, but what about all his brilliant inventions at Tesla? Well, the reporting points out that Musk's sole patent with the company is for the, wait for it, the shape of the charging port. I'm not kidding. Not the battery tech, not the engine, the physical shape of the plug. And the reason for this, our source argues, was purely strategic, to create a monopoly and stop other electric cars from using Tesla's charging stations. It's a clever business tactic, for sure, but it's not exactly a world-changing technological innovation. And let's talk about that shiny, green, and safe image for a second. The lithium needed for those batteries, it's mined in a process that can wreck soil and cause huge water shortages, so not so clean. And on the safety front, it gets darker.
There are allegations that Musk knew that batteries in the Model S could break down and catch fire, which has been linked to at least 30 deaths. On top of all that, we've all heard the stories about the so-called autonomous self-driving feature being, well, pretty buggy and frankly dangerous.
So, we've deconstructed the origin stories of his companies. But what about Musk, the man, the boss? Online, he comes across as this meme-loving, man-of-the-people kind of guy. But the picture painted by our source material, especially when you hear from employees, is drastically different.
I mean, just look at this list of allegations. He reportedly threatened to take away stock options from anyone who tried to unionize. There are claims he tried to cover up factory injuries and safety violations. The company's been sued for rampant racism, with black workers saying they were passed over for promotions. He forced employees back to the factory during the COVID lockdown, leading to a massive outbreak. And this isn't new. From Zip2 all the way to Twitter, there's this expectation that employees should literally sleep at the office. Doesn't exactly scream man of the people, does it?
In that decision to defy lockdown orders, it wasn't just some political statement. It had real-world life-or-death consequences. More than 450, that's the reported number of COVID cases that broke out in just one Tesla factory. That's not a statistic. That's over 450 families and lives put directly in harm's way.
And all of this, all these patterns we've been tracing, the ego, the questionable decisions, the disregard for staff, it all leads here, to the final act where everything went public in the most spectacular way possible, the absolutely chaotic takeover of Twitter. $44 billion. Let that sink in for a second. An absolutely staggering amount of money to pay for Twitter, especially since many analysts said it wasn't even worth that much. And here's the kicker. After making the offer, he tried to back out, but was legally forced to go through with the deal anyway. So he's just spent $44 billion. What's one of the very first things he does? He lays off about 4,000 people, just like that, gutting entire departments, including teams that were crucial for keeping the site secure and, actually running. What followed was just pure chaos. I mean, he was publicly firing employees on Twitter for daring to correct his technical statements. He gutted the content moderation teams, and, no surprise, reports showed a massive spike in hate speech. He then threw away one of the most recognizable brand names on the planet to rebrand as X, a name that, by the way, failed market research for his other company back in 1999. And now the plan is to turn it into a banking app, right after firing most of the people who knew how to keep it secure. You really can't make this stuff up. So when you put it all together, our source comes to a pretty blunt conclusion. It's this quote right here. He cares more about his own image and greed than about benefiting people. The argument is that the driving force behind everything isn't saving humanity. It's about building the Elon Musk brand and making money.
So what's the big picture here? When you step back and look at the whole timeline, our source argues that a very consistent pattern emerges. Time and again, you see this playbook. Rewrite history to make yourself the founder. Overpromise amazing tech that isn't quite ready or doesn't even exist. Prioritize your own public image, your own ego above almost everything else. Show a real disregard for the safety and rights of your workers. And use your immense wealth to control the story. From Zip2 to PayPal to Tesla to X, it's the same alleged pattern, just on a bigger and bigger stage. And all of this leaves us with one final, pretty heavy question to think about. What is the true cost of a modern myth? In a world where a handful of billionaires have so much power, what happens when we buy into the superhero story they tell about themselves? When we focus on the legend, what crucial and sometimes ugly truths are we choosing to ignore?